This is the Audience Connection podcast presented by Casual, the video partner for global brands. 9 offices, 4 continents, creating impactful stories on a global scale with a local touch. I'm your host, Lydia Chan. In this episode, I'm joined by Brad Argent, the head of Ancestry Studios, and a really visionary storyteller who is redefining how we use authentic narratives to inspire curiosity and build trust with audiences. Brad has spent nearly 2 decades bringing Ancestry's mission to life through innovative content and what he calls unbranded storytelling. Together, we had a fascinating conversation about the unique challenges of creating stories that inspire curiosity, the balance between confirmation and transformation narratives, and how you build trust by actually letting go. Brad also shared his insights on navigating the long game of content creation and why thinking beyond traditional advertising is the next evolution for brands. You'll definitely find nuggets of useful information in this one. Let's dive in. All right, well, I'm really excited for our guest today. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for our conversation. I want to start with really how you got to where you are today, right? Looking at your background, you have a background in psychology, did some consulting, and now you're this kind of incredible storyteller going all around the world telling these amazing, amazing stories. So, tell us how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, look, it's I'll give you the elevator pitch rather than the detailed view. Look, I've done a few things. I've worked mostly with technology. Did a stint in advertising in the digital space pre-internet bubble bursting. Spent a bit of time after that doing some consultancy work. And, I'd always had an interest in family history. And then back in 2007, I wasn't doing much, and I was really enjoying not doing much, And I noticed, and this dates me terribly. Ancestry were advertising for people to start their Australian business, and of course, this advertisement was in the newspaper. Some of you might remember what those things were. They were printed, and anyway, I applied, and you very rarely get a job that's a hobby, but you've got to give it a shot, right? And I was lucky enough to land the gig with someone else. There was 2 of us, very smart woman called Deborah Chesterton, and between us, we had to divide and conquer, what we needed to do in Australia to get the business established. And when it came to needing a spokesperson for the business, I wasn't quick enough, and Deborah said she didn't want to do it. So we kind of went, okay, all right, well, I need to be faster. And so I started doing the spokesperson work, leaning a little bit more into PR. We've used PR agencies for as long as I can remember in Ancestry, and they're very effective. But, you need somebody to represent the brand. Anyway, I did that, and I have been doing that really ever since I started almost 18 years ago. And it got to a point where probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I was looking for something a little bit different to do. And, we started to see this trend happening. And I made a video with a company called Momondo. And it became a viral hit. But what was really interesting for us was it had no mention of Ancestry in it at all. It was us, and it was certainly our product that was used. We DNA tested a group of people, and they ended up being from places that they did not expect. And there actually ended up being 2 of those random people were related, and they did not expect that either. So it was actually a very big moment, and it's been a very successful video for Momondo, that is now, I think they're now called Kayak. But what we noticed was, despite the fact that we had no branding in the show, we saw an uplift in DNA kit sales in the consumer genomics space, and a very significant uplift. And it was the start of a journey for us, on, okay, maybe there's a way that we can tell stories that isn't an advertisement, that's a narrative. So essentially, after that, I was told, hey, go and work out how to make television.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we got to where we are today.
Which is pretty amazing, right? Because, Ancestry has so many successful projects under their belts and still ongoing. I want to start by defining who your audience is. And that it's so, I imagine, really difficult for to have that one very specific definition, right? Because we're all united by this interest in personal history, cultural identity, human connections, right? So, your audience can really range many
Sure.
different types of people.
Absolutely, it can. If I wanted to, again, give you a really short answer, our audience is anybody who's curious. But to pull it back into sort of a marketing focus, we spend quite a lot of time and energy trying to understand our audience at a more granular level. And I can't speak with any real detail on the consumer insights stuff that we do, but we do segment our audience in quite a detailed way, and it's a very scientific method that the team use. But from the perspective of Ancestry Studios, the audience that we are trying to reach is, we're looking at those people who are, I think, considering the product or the service, who've seen it around, because we have wonderful unprompted brand recognition, right? So we don't have a branding issue. People know who we are. Awareness is not the problem. Problem that we're trying to solve for is demand. So the people that we want to speak to are people who've heard of us before, have a vague idea of what we do, have potentially some interest in finding out more about who they are. But it's always one of those things that you don't have to do today. There's no real urgency around it. It was early on, it was seen as family history was seen as one of those things that you do when you retire. Because historically, it took a lot of time to do it. And, these days, so much is available online. It is the kind of thing you can do with some immediacy. And so that's what we did. We decided, how do we get people interested? How do we create demand? And so the audience that we're trying to reach is the curious. They're already aware of us. They understand at least some level the products and services we provide, but they don't have a reason to do it just now.
So then how do you, I guess, reach them or think about the type of content that you're creating, right? My assumption would be just thinking about, the types of shows produced by Ancestry. It could be, maybe fans of mystery and investigation, right? A diverse audience exploring identity, right?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of nuance to the kinds of programming that we create. It's all a detective story, right? And family history is really about snooping on our ancestors, finding out what they got up to, right? That's the hook. It's uncovering a mystery. And so there's a very strong element of that to everything that we do. So yeah, there's that, but we explore notions and stories of identity. And I think all of it is a journey of self-discovery. It's just, we don't always frame it that way. You know, if you were trying to tell somebody you should do your family history because you'll get a better understanding of who you are, you'll have some greater sense of identity, and you'll go on this wonderful, magical, mystical journey, it's a little too much to take in. So you have to, I use a phrase, you know, if you want to sex it up, you have to dumb it down. Right? You can't go in selling a big idea. You've got to sell something small and consumable. So we do look at things as, is this about identity? Is this story about discovery? Is this a mystery that we're trying to solve? And everything kind of breaks down into one of two types of story. They become stories of confirmation or stories of transformation. So, you know, the way we frame most things is that here is an individual who is uncovering something about themselves. And the things that they uncover are either things that really resonate with them and make them go, absolutely, that is who I am, and that is why I am like this, because with my ancestors, I can see their stories coming through me. So, you know, I like to paint because my 3 times great-grandfather was an artist. So I can see that running through me. Or it's a story of transformation, where it's like, you know, I can see how all my ancestors have really struggled, and yet here I am being successful, or having broken out of that background of, you know, poverty. And you can see people, and it's one of the things I so much love about the work that I do. You see them become someone else, and it's such a privilege. You know, I often frame it as, in the work that we do, we create core memories for people that they will take with them for the rest of their lives. And now that might sound like a big and somewhat grandiose thing, but it happens. And what I often remind my colleagues at Ancestry is, when you see it happening and you see it on screen, what you need to remember is thousands and thousands of those moments are happening every day without a camera.
Yes.
And so all we're doing is pushing record.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the connection part, right? It's like you know that this one story is going to resonate with so many people, right? So going back to storytelling as a demand driver, and looking at confirmation stories versus transformation stories, is there one that, for lack of a better word, works better than the other?
I don't think so, because I think they speak to, each story speaks to somebody differently, and everybody takes away something a little bit different. I personally prefer the drama of a transformation. I think it plays out better. It's easier, you know, if you start sort of diving into the mechanics of filming, it's easier to get a reaction to somebody when there is a transformation story, because it can be such a shift. But a confirmation story told the right way can be equally as powerful, even if it isn't necessarily as emotionally moving.
Yeah.
But, you know, because we all have those stories in our family. It's like, oh, you know, my great grandfather was Scottish, I think, or, you know, we've always celebrated St. Patrick's Day. So, you know, I want to just prove that there's that connection. So they can work as the kinds of stories that might more easily pull people in, those confirmation stories. Sometimes the transformation stories can be so powerful that people might be slightly reluctant to, if you watch somebody take a DNA test and get a result that really contradicts what they believe about themselves, the risk you run with those kinds of stories is that somebody might go, oh, well, I'm not sure I want to experience that. I'm not ready for that. And it is something that, it is a concern that we have when we do these things, which is why the vast bulk of what we do is, just a confirmation thing or revealing something that is unknown. But my personal preference is the transformation because there's more drama.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I mean, I never thought about that, right? Is how I guess brands can put out stories that, I mean, at the end of the day, you want stories to touch people, right? But as you mentioned, it can touch kind of like the emotion of fear, right? Or of this kind of reluctance of finding something out.
It can. But when that happens, all I think it does is delay it, because there is, if you like, the other side of that coin is, if you are watching somebody go through something that is, quite transformative, and say, for example, they're discovering one of their parents is not a biological parent, and they are finding out who their real biological family is. It can be initially, as a viewer, quite, I'm not sure I want to know that. But then as you watch them go through it and process it and come to a good place with it, what it does is it normalizes and socializes the behavior. So it removes a lot of the stigma around it. And I'm always eternally grateful to people who go through those very personal moments on camera, because they're making it easier for other people to do that. They're making it something that is okay to talk about. And, and I think that is the goal initially for us when I started back in 2007. What I wanted to do was make family history one of those things that could be a dinner table conversation. It's okay to talk about. It was a little stuffy and dull, and it was kind of sitting in the same category as stamp collecting. And not that I want to throw any shade on philatelists out there. It's an awesome hobby. But I wanted to create something that I wanted to make it cool.
Yeah.
And, part of that process is to normalize and socialize it. And you get, you have to have faith.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to, I guess, explore when we're looking at confirmation stories versus transformation stories. I imagine the transformation stories take a longer time to tell, or it's like it lends to a more longer form.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it does. Because you need, you can't just rip the Band-Aid off. You need to ease somebody into that process. And, as a viewer, you want to see them, thinking about it, going through the motions of that, and getting to a point where you're seeing them slowly become, adjusting their sense of self based on this new information.
Mm-hmm.
And that what we do when we create this kind of content, regardless of what type of story it is highly curated. So we try and understand, all right, who is the person that we're telling the story about? Get a sense of what's their personality like. What are they curious about? And then we do our research and we find stories that we know will resonate with that individual. It's a very highly curated, highly thought after about process. We don't just throw random history in front of them. It's selected.
Yeah.
And I look, the reality of that is that's just the nature of filmmaking, right? You don't have the luxury of the time to, spend hours and hours, film hours and hours of research where it's just, look, here's another agricultural labor in the 19th century. That stuff, that can be a little dull. What you're looking for is that nugget that's going to move this person along. So there's a bunch of work that happens behind the scenes to curate a moment in the story.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, where the kind of beauty and art of filmmaking comes in, right? We have to not follow those rules, if you will, but we have to leverage, the arc of storytelling really to be able to bring these stories to life and make them engaging.
Yeah, and look, I've kind of come up with this idea of what we call unbranded content, which is what we make. And the premise behind that is in the narratives that we create and the stories that we tell, we don't mention the brand. We don't necessarily show the product unless it moves the narrative forward, unless it is, an authentic and organic appearance of something in art that drives the story forward. And there's a couple of reasons for that, Lydia. One of them is I don't want to disrupt a narrative by having to force a product placement in or a brand mention in. But also I think what I don't want is it's not necessary for me to do that because I don't have a brand awareness problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we create this beautiful story and then we'll put the brand at either end of it, or we use our own talent in it so that there's a strong association between the person appearing on screen and the brand. So it's a lovely way to get a brand in without really getting a brand in. And I think any brand that has great awareness, but is just trying to drive demand, can use this. There's nothing necessarily special or magical about Ancestry as a brand. Sure, we have, our products are history and identity products, if you like, that lends itself to a particular type of storytelling. But I think any brand that is trying to solve this problem of demand as opposed to a problem of awareness can use storytelling to do that, because brand is story. It's so tell it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think every brand has a story to tell, right? And it's all about kind of laddering back up to what is truly the mission, right? Or the vision of your brand. And usually it's something sometimes quite lofty, right?
Yeah.
And that's where, the stories can parallel and come in to, as long as it ladders back up to this mission or this vision, then it doesn't have to be about a particular product or a particular service.
Yeah, but it's a very easy thing to say. It's quite a difficult thing to execute, and I think that the internal challenges of that are trust. Filming stuff is not cheap, and we don't. we collaborate quite a lot. We make our own stuff occasionally, but often we are collaborating. More often than not, we're collaborating. And we will pull back from editorial control, even to the things that we are, funding, part funding more often. Because, and there's the reason for that is because we trust the people we're creating with to tell the story. Now, we'll consult, absolutely, because, we want to tell the kinds of stories that we feel are, right for the brand. But we won't stop the creative people from being creative, because ultimately that's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
So, give them the scope. Now, that requires a significant amount of trust. And it's not just trust between ourselves and our creative partners. It's internal trust, where you're going to say, I need to spend money to make something that doesn't mention the brand. Right? That's a
How do you make
risk.
that case? How do you get buy-in?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that we got that buy-in was almost by accident with the Momondo video, which we, didn't cost us a lot. We were able to do it kind of under the radar internally. It was kind of risky because it was essentially cause-based marketing, and it was successful. So really, the way that we did it was almost a guerrilla campaign. All right, we did it without a huge amount of internal involvement, and we saw the power of it. I mean, you can and look, it wasn't just that one thing. We started doing a few other things. We would appear in shows to, again, move a story along, explain something. And what we saw was, okay, we would get a spike in sales from, appearing in a documentary. And then what we discovered is, well, hang on, if these things are being broadcast and we buy a spot in a show that we are also in, it was a multiplier. That spot would perform 2 or 3 times better than it would if we weren't in the show. And so we were kind of going, okay, there's definitely some positive correlation between us telling a story and performance. Now, it is still more art than science. It's becoming, given the nature of, the content consumption world, it's difficult to tell who's consuming what and when these days. So there is an element of, again, trust in the process. And often we only see the effect that these things have when they disappear. So you've got to, you've got to believe. And that's hard. That requires courage. And not everybody can do that, because, it is a significant amount of money. It's hard to go and say, I'm going to take $6 million out of an advertising budget that I can measure to the nth degree and put it into something that I just think is going to work.
Yeah.
That's, and look, massive credit to the senior leadership team at Ancestry, because they have continually supported this approach. And sure, there's been evidence to support that, and to validate that support, but it requires trust, and I'm eternally grateful for it.
Yeah, and trust for your audience too, right? And that this is something that we are genuinely investing in, and we are, utilizing our trusted kind of partners who can really, be the ones to tell this story, right? And going kind of putting our trust fully in them as well to tell the story, right? Versus having that story come from all these various different stakeholders or coming from the brand.
Yeah, and look, and that is it. That is difficult. Letting go is difficult, but it's worthwhile. And it's not. And look, and I mean, no disrespect to advertising or marketing agencies, because they do a brilliant job, and we continue to work with them across multiple platforms. But this kind of storytelling requires something different. And it requires you connecting with the right kinds of storytellers. And so not really knowing anybody's individual situation, I would say that for most people, for most brands out there, they don't have the existing relationships that they need to do this. They're going to need to build new relationships and build new trust relationships. And look, there are a whole bunch of people out there that can help you with that. I mean, we work with the very talented people at UTA to help us find production companies and directors who can work with us and help us tell the story. But, that's not a turnkey solution. It requires building relationships and trusting one another.
Yeah.
Trust and verify. Trust and verify.
So, Brad, along the kind of similar lines, in your opinion, where should brand storytelling sit, right? Or branded storytelling sit within the organization, right? Is it marketing? Is it PR? Is it comms? Is it a separate function?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a very interesting question, Lydia. We sit within the creative team, and there's a reason for that. Is partly because the guys in Ancestry Studios are creative people, and the one thing creative people need above all else is other creative people.
Yes.
So, but the relationships that we have with comms team, with marketing, are deep. And it's not just that. We work very closely with finance. We work very closely with our legal department. We work very closely with the social media teams. But I think at its heart, it has to be creative, because the tendency that you have if you shift more towards a marketing or a comms environment is about marketing and comms objectives as opposed to creative objectives. And not that there isn't oversight from both marketing and comms, it absolutely is, and they provide really good advice to us, and we consult with them frequently. But the heart of it, for me, lies in creative, because ultimately it is a creative process.
Yeah. Whole separate department then. Separate from them.
Yeah.
So, Brad, I want to kind of get into a little bit of the nitty gritty when it comes to like multi-platform, channels, the distribution. So can you talk a little bit about the approach, like the channel strategy approach? So, if I kind of look at specifically social and say YouTube, right? I see a lot of content, a lot of, various different, again, programs from Ancestry. Even talking about output length, right? Like because that's a question we're always asked, like, how long should this piece be? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Is it, 50 minutes when we're looking at putting it on streaming platforms, PBS, et cetera.
Yeah. So look, it's a very interesting question, and we've debated it quite a bit before we kind of got to where we are. So, well, let's talk about content length, right? Runtime. I think short form content has a place. Absolutely. It's snackable. It can be intriguing, and I think it can activate people. And so whenever we create stuff, we create things with multiple platforms in mind. So are we going to pull a scene lift out of here? We need something that's under 3 minutes for Instagram. And maybe we need something that's shot portrait for TikTok. So we do think about those things, but when we're creating the content, if we're creating something for broadcast, we kind of, already have predefined runtimes. But if we're creating something where there isn't any real fixed boundaries, it's what really determines runtime is budget, ultimately. But narrative, it should be driven by narrative. It should be tell the story. If the story takes 12 minutes, the runtime is 12 minutes. If it takes 57 minutes, that's the runtime. What we're finding about content consumption, particularly on YouTube, is people are very comfortable watching long form on YouTube. And, we were considering about 12 months ago, maybe 18 months ago now, we were considering a fast channel, which is essentially a sub channel with a specific category or feel to it. And we were looking at that, and we were looking at how do we become part of that. And what was necessary for us in order to participate in that, was to license a bunch of content that we could play out on that fast channel. And, I was thinking about that, and I kind of went, well, I have a YouTube channel. Why don't I just license content for YouTube? And then I can control the content. I can determine whether or not I want to monetize it and have advertising on it. And there's a debate for and against that. But I can then cultivate my own audience, and I can use other channels, such as social channels, to drive people to that channel to participate. And that our YouTube channel is not just about, here's a bunch of long form content. There's a little bit of short form. There's content about the product, content about the services. This is how you start your family history. This is why you would take a DNA test. So it allows us to serve people or give them access to more brand-focused content in the guise of simply a family history channel, if you like. And we work with a partner, Little Dot Studios, who manage a lot of our YouTube content for us, and it's been a game changer. Okay. It's one of those things that just made so much sense to outsource, because they understood the platform, they understood how to get people engaged on it, how to get more views, longer views of things, and it's a great way for us to connect with our audience. So, I think for us, it's definitely the way forward. We will still make content, broadcast content. We would absolutely make streamer content, but we're now focusing more on acquiring content for our channel. So licensing content, and creating that, a place where people can come and consume that. It's been eye-opening, diving into the world of content licensing, and the vagaries around that. But it's been fascinating. And again, if you're a brand out there, there's always going to be content that you can access that will be supportive of the brand message that you're telling, and it's available. It's not always cheap.
Yeah.
But and let's like to use an example. If you were a car manufacturer, why wouldn't you license the back catalogue of Top Gear?
Mm.
Now, on that show, they're going to talk about cars that are not your cars. But that's okay, because as a brand, you're confident enough with the product that you've got. It's all right for them to talk about other cars because you're about cars. You're not just about your brand, you're about cars. And, again, that's a leap of faith that's required, but I think it's possible. I think it's possible for everyone.
Yeah. Before our chat, I typed into ChatGPT, what are the kind of top shows out there about genealogy, basically, and ancestry shows came up as top ones, but they're not many, right? I think, or rather, they're somewhat hard to find. I think only maybe a couple of other shows kind of came up.
Yeah. Look, obviously the flagship is Who Do You Think You Are? Is a brilliant series. It's been running for many, many years in the UK and Australia, and it ran for like 7 or 8 seasons in the US. It's a beautiful show. We make a show in the UK called DNA Journey, which is actually, we licensed that for our US and Canada YouTube channels. So it's a British show with British talent in it, but it seems to resonate very well with the US audience. Making a brand new series out here in Australia, which I just wrapped on a couple of days ago. So most of the distributors that we talk to tell us there is an appetite for more of this type of content. One of the challenges that we often face, though, is an asset like Who Do You Think You Are is so good that everything is compared against it. So it can be, a challenge to convince distributors that it's worth investing in something else. But yeah, there is space out there for more, absolutely. And a large chunk of my time is spent developing potential shows. And anybody who's spent any time in the development environment knows you have to develop 100 shows before one gets picked up.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is a long game. This show that we've just wrapped on took 7 years to get made. Who Do You Think You Are took 14 years before they commissioned the first episode.
And I think that's really great to hear, right? Because people kind of need to understand the time frame for these things.
Absolutely, and it is one of the challenges that we face is if we get a commission today. I've got a couple of shows at the moment that I'm hoping will get commissioned. If I get a commission today, right, and right now we're in December 2024, I will be lucky if I see something on air in Q4 of 2025. So most, but not all, but most companies have a tendency to run on a 12-month cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's challenge to get them interested in things that are right at the end of the 12-month period and to keep them motivated about it. And look, that is best case. Worst case is it's 2 years, or in some cases 7 or 14 years. But which is why you don't just pursue one idea. you pursue many, many things because so few of them will hit, and even fewer will hit soon.
Yeah, and Brad, I think that is a really great kind of segue to wrap things up in our conversation is sort of what's your advice, right, to our audience who's maybe looking to dig deeper into their brands and telling these stories. And, it's sort of just hearing like, hey, these things don't come to fruition right away, right? So what advice do you have for them to make things happen?
Yeah, look, if you are sort of thinking about, okay, how can I leverage this for my brand? Think outside the brand. Find somebody who is good at making things. Find an agency. UTA is a great agency that we use, but there absolutely are others out there who can help you get into and navigate the creative space, because it's very different from other things that you might have done. It's not like making an ad. It's very different. And create a trust relationship. You've got, and ultimately, Lydia, it's a risk and you've got to take a punt. You've got to believe in it. And if you're a brand who is considering playing in this space, you have greater brand awareness, you just want to drive demand, you know how crucial good demand activity can be to driving revenue. So there's an upside. If it works, there's an upside. And even if it doesn't work, at least you're creating something that is beautiful and enduring. And that's the other thing to keep in mind. You're creating content and you're putting it out in the world. It has a very, very long tail. So don't expect, it might not be an immediate success. It might take a while for it to build momentum or build an audience, but it's always going to be there. Particularly if you create it and you own a chunk of it, you have control over it. I think it's the next logical phase in the evolution of major brands.
All right, Brad, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed our conversations. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, mate. Thanks for connecting.
Thanks for tuning in to the Audience Connection podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. If you'd like to connect with me about how I can help you tell better stories and connect better with your audiences, drop me a note, lydia@casualfilms.com. We'll be back with more episodes soon. See you next time.